This week in diplomacy, the president's European tour, Turkish statements about readiness to bring negotiations back to Istanbul, and then an unexpected peace plan from the United States with deadlines. All of this has been happening to us over the past few days, and with each passing day, the tension both inside the country and abroad only continues to grow. Why is America putting pressure on Ukraine right now, and what agreements did President Zelensky manage to reach with the Europeans? TSN correspondent Iryna Kondrachuk investigated the topic.
Athens. They have contracted the transportation of gas from Greece to Ukraine. Paris. Regarding 100 multi-role fighter jets, it is likely that an agreement has been signed. Madrid. So, the third day of the Ukrainian president's European tour is no less eventful than the previous ones. Ankara. The main goal of the visit remains bringing Russia back to the negotiation table. 4 countries in 4 days. How did Europeans receive Zelensky after the corruption scandal about Erdogan's determination, and what awaits us next? On Sunday morning, the presidential plane lands in Athens. Zelensky heads to a meeting with the president of Greece. People stopped along the road to raise Greek and Ukrainian flags in their hands. President Katerina Sakelloropoulou declares support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, assistance in reconstruction, and the return of Ukrainian children. And despite the fact that Greece and Russia have had close ties, we cannot forgive the violation of borders and international law. Later, at the Prime Minister's palace, the heads of state gas companies from both sides sign an agreement on a vertical energy corridor from Greece to Ukraine. This is meant to cover part of the deficit that arose as a result of devastating Russian attacks on Ukrainian gas production, explains Naftogaz head Serhiy Koretsky.
The only possible way to get through this heating season is to import additional volumes. It's definitely a mix of gas from different sources, including American gas. The Greek side is providing us with credit support and offers deferred payment options. On Monday,
a military base near Paris. The presidents of Ukraine and France sign a historic agreement to strengthen combat aviation with French Rafale fighter jets. Kyiv will be purchasing them from Paris over the next 10 years. It is likely that we will also pay with a reparations loan.
I believe that in the end we will still be able to reach an agreement to push this issue through so that Russian assets are used specifically for the European defense package, for Ukrainian production and for the most part air defense systems from the United States.
Volodymyr Zelensky also states that Ukraine is receiving French radars, 8 air defense systems, as well as 6 launchers. Additionally, by the end of the year, France is preparing an extra defense package concerning air defense systems, along with missiles and counter-drone systems.
We also jointly visited the headquarters of the multinational coalition forces in support of Ukraine. It has been operating for several weeks now under the command of France and the United Kingdom. These are security guarantees within the coalition of the willing. 60 planners in Paris are coordinating how to deploy forces that are positioned away from the front line after a ceasefire.
And also by the end of 2029, Ukraine is expected to receive 55 French locomotives. An agreement in the field of transportation for nearly €500 million. At the Élysée Palace, the French manufacturer of trains and electric locomotives signs an agreement with the chairman of the board of Ukrzaliznytsia.
a significant portion, about 40%, is a non-repayable grant administered by the World Bank. For Ukrzaliznytsia, this is a very advantageous financial agreement. The rest is preferential loan financing from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Tuesday, the Parliament building in Madrid. The Ukrainian delegation is shown the meeting hall, and Zelensky's name is entered into the book of honored guests.
And this is already one of Spain's defense companies. Here they showcase anti-drone systems, turrets, aerial and ground drones, long-range detection radars and munitions. And they emphasize that they are ready to cooperate. Next is a tête-à-tête meeting with King Felipe VI of Spain, followed by one with Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, after which statements are made about the Spanish aid package. This includes, in particular, 40 missiles for air defense and at least €615 million for the purchase and development of weapons and support for the energy sector.
This package will include $300 million for weapons, $100 million for the PRL program, and $215 million for products for the system. of anti-drone and radar systems.
The president's European tour took place against the backdrop of a major corruption scandal. This concerns schemes for profiteering from the energy sector during the war. However, none of this is being publicly commented on by the leaders of partner countries.
They understand that no matter what the situation is, the collapse of the power vertical in Ukraine would lead to Ukraine's defeat. The fact that they don't speak about it publicly doesn't mean they're not outraged. And it doesn't mean that in private communications they aren't asking tough questions and making demands.
Ankara is the final stop on the president's international tour. The meeting with the Turkish leader has lasted for more than 2 hours. Erdogan declares his readiness to bring Moscow back to the negotiating table in Istanbul.
We believe it would be appropriate for the Istanbul process to resume in an expanded format.
Turkey wants to be not just a platform for negotiations. Turkey wants to act as a mediator. I don't think Turkey will take Russia's side. They will also be looking for various compromise solutions.
While the president was on an international tour, representatives from the Pentagon arrived in Kyiv with a new peace plan, and Zelensky met with them upon his return. If I may to add, thank you. This is very important. The demands that the president of Ukraine had previously rejected, today he discussed with the Europeans, and they also rejected the key points of the US-Russian plan. And later in the evening, Volodymyr Zelensky released a video address.
Ukraine will work quickly and diligently today, on Saturday and Sunday, and throughout all of next week. And for as long as it takes, I will fight tirelessly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to ensure that among all the points of the plan, there will not be, at least 2 have been omitted. These are the dignity and freedom of Ukrainians.
Iryna, Kondrachuk, Litvinenko, and Maximo Zmirko. TSN 1+1. Marathon. United News.
So, the so-called 28-point plan, which is being actively discussed around the world, includes conditions such as recognizing the territories already occupied by Russia, the withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from the entire territory of Donbass, reducing the Ukrainian army to only 600,000, limiting long-range weapons, enshrining in the constitution the refusal of NATO membership, and a ban on the deployment of peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. Whether it was exactly these proposals that Pentagon Representative Dendry Skol handed over to President Zelensky the day before, the White House has given assurances. The document will differ from the 28-point plan developed by the special representatives of Presidents Trump and Putin, which essentially contains a plan for Ukraine's capitulation. TSN's own correspondent in the United States, Olga Koshelenko, tracked all of these statements. She is currently in direct contact with the TSN studio in Washington and will help us figure this out. Hello, Olga. So how many of these peace plans are there after all, at least from what we know? What information do we have about them, and are they really also discouraging for Ukraine, as is being said in the United States? Greetings, colleague. There is every reason to believe that the plan Dendry Skol handed over to Zelensky the day before differs somewhat from the so-called 28-point plan that was published in the media. In particular, according to Axios, the Kyiv version, for example, included security guarantees similar to NATO's Article 5. But still, as Zelensky's words suggest, the plan is bad and puts him before a very difficult choice, as he said, dignity or the risk of losing a key partner. But let's really break it down. This so-called 28-point plan, which essentially contains a plan for Ukraine's capitulation, was reportedly developed, according to American media, by U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff, Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, and the Russian dictator's special representative Kirill Dmitriev. What does it actually entail? Essentially, it's a list of Putin's boldest demands, which have already been discussed before. And Russia, in turn, would get all the benefits. Sanctions would be lifted, the occupied territories would be recognized as Russian, and Russia would return to the G20. And all of this, of course, in exchange for a promise not to attack Ukraine or Europe. An interesting clue as to how exactly this document became public was actually given by Stephen Witkoff himself. He accidentally commented on a post by Vex from one of the American journalists who had actually published his article on this topic about the 28-point plan. Witkoff wrote in a comment to the post, quote, "He probably got it from Carr." Within a few minutes, Witkoff deleted this comment. It seems he made a mistake and meant to send his guess about the source of the leak to someone in a private message. But journalists are already trying to decipher who Kai is. And most agree that it is Kirill Dmitriev, his co-author, who is interested in making sure that this capitulation plan for Ukraine is widely discussed in the press. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre, when asked the day before about claims that the new American proposals supposedly contain concessions only from the Ukrainian side, replied that this is because journalists have only seen leaks from one side.
Have you read the full plan? No, you haven't read it. Have you read reports from one side of the war? So I want you to understand that the administration has been negotiating with both sides at a high level. You have seen President Trump directly engage with both President Putin and President Zelensky, just like his national security team. Special Representative Witkoff and Secretary of State Rubio met with some Ukrainians just last week to discuss this very plan.
The influential American publication Most Read Journal, citing an official in the Trump administration, writes that the United States has not yet settled on any specific plan and will continue to consult with both warring sides, and the final agreement may include elements from both the plan presented by Driscoll in Kyiv and the 28-point plan, the official added. But on the other hand, a number of American publications also report that the administration is putting pressure on Zelensky, taking advantage of the moment. The new U.S. peacekeeping efforts are unfolding against the backdrop of a major political crisis caused by a corruption scandal in Ukraine. And considering that Russia is making slight but steady advances on the front, American media suggests that Washington is counting on the fact that since Kyiv is currently weakened, it will be more accommodating. Next, I'd like to share the Wall Street Journal's thoughts on this topic.
Supporters of the US proposal argue that Russia's steady, albeit gradual, successes on the battlefield, along with the corruption scandal involving Zelensky's associates, will increase pressure on Kyiv to strike a deal. But this assumption was challenged by a Western official who said that as a result of the corruption investigation, Zelensky actually has even less room to maneuver, and that abandoning fundamental security positions for his country would only further undermine his standing at home.
So what should Zelensky do next? Today, he has already held consultations with European leaders who were also not involved in developing the new American plan. And only today, according to sources, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also expected to speak with European officials responsible for national security. Zelensky said that he expects to speak with Donald Trump in the coming days as well. He did not specify whether it would be a phone call or an in-person meeting. A phone conversation also took place today with Vice President J.D. Vance and U.S. Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll, who in fact brought this plan to Kyiv just yesterday. Zelensky also said in his address today that the coming week will be very difficult. There will be a lot of work both on the diplomatic front and a lot of pressure, both political and informational. And the president compared this period to the beginning of the full-scale invasion. He said, "I did not betray then, and I will not betray now."
We do not make loud statements. We will calmly work with America and all our partners. There will be a constructive search for solutions with our main partner. I will present arguments, I will persuade, offer alternatives, but we will definitely not give the enemy any reason to say that it is Ukraine that does not want peace, that it is Ukraine that is disrupting the process, and that Ukraine is not ready for diplomacy. That will not happen.
Notably, Donald Trump had remained silent right up until this moment. He still has not commented either on the corruption scandal in Ukraine or on these new so-called peace proposals from the United States. But just now, an interview with Trump was released on Fox News, and there he confirmed that he expects a response from Zelensky regarding this peace plan by Thanksgiving, that is, by next Thursday. And to make things clearer, global media are reporting on the unprecedented pressure that the US is exerting on Kyiv through closed channels. They are threatening in particular to stop providing intelligence and to cease selling weapons, even through NATO. This is reported by Reuters, citing sources in the American administration. Today, Donald Trump is scheduled to meet with the newly elected mayor of New York, Mamdani, at around 10 p.m. Kyiv time. And if this meeting is open to the press, we hope to hear more questions and answers from Trump there, because the topic is truly very hot right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, we will be waiting for further developments. TSN correspondent in the United States, Olga Koshelenko, on the peace initiatives of the states and on whether Ukraine, as President Zelensky said, could really find itself in a situation where it has to choose between dignity and the support of perhaps its most important partner. Meanwhile, the European Union only learned about the existence of the US peace plan regarding Ukraine from the news. Brussels was not officially informed about work on the initiative. Today, EU country leaders discussed their own plan of further action with Volodymyr Zelensky. What European politicians are saying and what they plan to do will be reported by Radio Svoboda's correspondent in Brussels, Zoryana Stepanenko, especially for TSN.
The President of the European Council confirmed today that the European Union was not officially notified about such initiatives. And I wouldn't be exaggerating at all if I said that everyone here was genuinely surprised by the existence of a 28-point plan. But those were more like yesterday's emotions. Today, the focus is more on what to do next. First and foremost, to support Ukraine so that it can negotiate from a position of strength. And this European strategy will not change, the head of the European Commission assured today.
We will continue to support Ukraine just as we have done before. Ukraine can count on us because this is not just aggression against Ukraine, but aggression against the very foundations of the UN Charter. This is happening on European soil, and that is why we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
I still see it as a list of issues that urgently need to be discussed between Ukraine and Russia rather than as a final plan. We want to ensure that Ukraine can address these issues from a strong negotiating position, and it is Ukraine alone that must decide what compromises to make. We are not arbitrators here, but defenders of Ukraine. She is defending her own freedom and that of Europe.
The British Prime Minister also agrees that, above all, it is up to Ukraine to determine its own future. Keir Starmer, the President of France, and the Chancellor of Germany all spoke with Zelensky by phone today. For the sake of this conversation, Friedrich Merz had to urgently change his plans for today. European leaders will discuss the high-profile plan tomorrow on the sidelines of the G20 summit. This year, the highest leadership is absent from the forum not only from Russia, but also from China and the United States. Nevertheless, Europe still wants to talk to the American side about its proposal. Whether there will be reciprocity from Washington remains to be seen, but previously Donald Trump did engage in such contacts. The American experts I spoke with doubt that the proposed initiative has a high chance of being implemented. I do not
expect that Ukraine will accept this. I also do not expect that our European allies will be pleased about it, so I am not exactly sure what will happen. One possible scenario is that Trump declares victory, but in reality nothing actually happens. Another is that these peace talks happen on and off. But for this to become a lasting, meaningful peace that Ukraine agrees to, that would be very surprising to me.
Among the points of the so-called US-Russian plan is Ukraine's renunciation of NATO membership and the alliance's refusal to accept it. I contacted NATO headquarters to clarify whether such a discussion is ongoing among the allies and whether they are prepared to make such a promise. In response, it was stated that NATO wants the war in Ukraine to end with a just and lasting peace and considers President Trump's efforts in this direction to be key. The Wall Street Journal has learned that Europe is working on its own version of a plan to end the war, with what are considered to be fairer terms for Ukraine. The details of this proposal are unknown, but for example, the German Chancellery, summarizing today's conversation with Zelensky, insisted that the line of contact should be the starting point for reaching an understanding and that the Ukrainian armed forces must remain combat ready. Accordingly, it can be assumed that Europe is against reducing their numbers, as well as withdrawing from Donbass. Journalists report that they want to finalize work on the European plan in the coming days. From Brussels, Zoryana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Svoboda, especially for TSN 1+, Marathon.